tonight on the evening news.
The level is going to be coming down, but that's not to let your guard down.
Tonight, officials say the worst may be over as the Red River reaches its crest in Winnipeg, but the city declares an emergency for more flood fighting ahead.
You wouldn't dare walk through that. You'd get swept away.
The water is still rising in the Red River Valley, cutting off communities and creating hazards. And it's the second biggest flood in more than a century. We take to the air to see just how big that is.
From Global Winnipeg, the evening news with Peter Chura and Eva Kovac.
High water continues to plague much of Winnipeg and southern Manitoba, but tonight we may have reached a turning point in the flood fight. Provincial officials say the Red River is cresting in Winnipeg 2 days earlier than expected. Levels are expected to start dropping slightly, but will remain high well into next week. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Eva is away tonight. Officials warn there are weeks of flood fighting still ahead. In Winnipeg today, the mayor declared a local state of emergency in some areas of the city. The state of emergency applies to most properties along the Red, Assiniboine, and Seine rivers in Winnipeg that aren't protected by the city's primary dike system. That covers about 800 homes in Winnipeg, although officials say only about 230 of those are considered at risk of flooding. The declaration allows the city to order mandatory evacuations if necessary. Now, one of those areas is along Scotia Street in West Kildonan. That's where Global's Nellie Gonzalez joins us now live. Nellie, if the worst of the high water is over, why are city officials still worried?
Well, Peter, the city's flood fighters say river levels will remain very high for several days, and this will continue to pose a threat to homes in low-lying areas of the city, like right here on Scotia Street. Sandbagging is complete, but if a dike fails, the state of emergency will allow the city to respond quickly. The race to save homes along rivers in Winnipeg continues. This morning on Scotia Street, the mayor signed a local state of emergency for properties inside the primary dike system.
What it does, it gives us the ability to act quickly in case we have to.
The mayor says the seemingly dramatic move is no reason to panic.
Whether there might be an evacuation that might be necessary, etc. And it's basically a precaution, so I don't want anybody to be alarmed by this.
The Red River has crested 2 days earlier than expected at 22.5 feet, but water levels will remain high for weeks.
The level is going to be coming down, but that's not to let your guard down.
Indeed, the flood fight grew more intense today. In St. Norbert, fast-moving water threatened to wash out a clay dike protecting several homes. Some residents had to be taken out by boat as crews worked to shore up the crumbling berm. Firefighters stood by for rescue duty if necessary. And today, a setback for sandbaggers on Scotia Street. A leak in the dike at this home is now forcing volunteers to frantically seal it as quickly as possible.
We're trying to stop the leakage through this dike where there's obviously some sort of crack or join. So we put down plastic and then more sandbags on the inside to try and pressure down to hold it.
The only time it needed sandbagging was in '97.
Neil Froese has lived on Scotia Street for 35 years. He says he's overwhelmed by all the help he's getting from the community.
I am more concerned about the people down river that way.
The city says more volunteers are needed tonight to replace the hundreds of students who took the day off to help in the sandbagging efforts.
It's a trickle. It's a very moderate need for volunteers this evening and tomorrow, so we still ask people to call 311 for the volunteer effort.
And late today, city officials say 3 homes in different parts of the city were evacuated because of overland flooding and because the ring dikes began to fail and there was a risk of water getting inside the homes. Peter?
And Nellie, what can we expect over the next few days?
Well, Peter, river levels are expected to drop to 21.9 feet tomorrow, but city officials are not letting their guard down. They say in case any dikes fail, a 24-hour rapid response unit is standing by, and pumping crews will also be on standby to assist homeowners that are still worried about their properties.
All right, thanks a lot, Nellie Global's Nellie Gonzalez reporting live tonight from Scotia Street. Now, south of the city, the red hasn't yet reached its peak in communities already surrounded by water. Niverville and Gretna were added to the long list of towns forced to partially close their ring dikes today. Around St. Adolphe, more people were forced to seek shelter elsewhere as floodwaters threatened to cut them off. Global's Jeff Keel has that story.
It's an intimidating scene. Water rushing over this road near St. Adolphe like a whitewater rapid.
You wouldn't dare walk through that. You'd get swept away.
Herbert Pauls and his wife came back from a wedding in Saskatoon Monday night to this. They had to park their vehicle and make arrangements to stay with friends in Winnipeg because they couldn't drive to their home. The couple's house is safe, but their neighbor's is not.
We're going to go help our next door neighbor down the road do some sandbagging because their dike isn't high enough. They're in big trouble.
In St. Adolphe this morning, staff at this nursing home helped finish evacuating its 40 residents to Winnipeg. It's being done because of concerns of the town being cut off from services if the community's ring dike is closed. The area's mayor feels this is unlikely and would only happen if a lot of rain fell.
It takes an awful lot of water to make things come up enough to cause us to evacuate the town or close the dikes completely.
But the mayor says the greater concern is if Highway 75 outside of town is washed over.
The evacuation of a place like St. Adolphe is not so much the ring dike, but the loss of access. So if Highway 75 is closed, that would mean an evacuation of the town.
And students here are helping fill sandbags that are being delivered to homeowners outside of the town's dike.
Because of the forecast, the levels are increasing. They had their work done, and now they have to find out they have to make it a little bit higher. So that's what's causing a lot of this activity today.
The river's crest is expected over the weekend in the St. Adolphe area, but provincial flood forecasters say water levels are expected to rise by another foot between now and then. Jeff Keel, Global News.
Now, road washouts, evacuations, and calls for help in communities continue across the province tonight. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see important flood-related information throughout the show. And Andrew Slobodian is here now with our first check on weather. So everybody's keeping their eyes on the skies tonight to see if there's going to be any rain that might make the situation worse.
Well, I was watching the forecast very closely the past 2 days. Originally, it was calling for some rain tonight, which was obviously the last thing we wanted. Very bad news for flooding. But now it seems like that system is really going to stay in western Manitoba, and only a 30% chance of showers tonight and tomorrow here in Winnipeg. So good news for the flood outlook. Right now in Winnipeg, though, very thick, ominous-looking clouds above us. But again, only expecting a few sprinkles of rain here. We're at plus 13, nice and warm out there with winds out of the south at 26. Now that storm system is really going to stay in western Manitoba. It actually could mean some snow for Swan River. I'll be back in a few minutes to tell you all about that. Peter?
The province says the flood of 2009 will go down in history as the second biggest in more than a century in most of the Red River Valley. The view from the ground is awe-inspiring, but to see just how far the floodwaters stretch, you have to be in the air. Global's Lorraine Nickel takes you along for the ride.
To appreciate the magnitude of a flood that stretched the Red River 12 kilometers wide, you have to be in the air, 1,600 feet up. We're going to fly south to Morris, a community all but surrounded by the rising red. On our way just south of Winnipeg near St. Adolphe, the river is more like a lake. Water covers highways and farmland. The Red River has swallowed it all up.
Homes that were raised up from the 97 flood are being sandbagged. Volunteers are being brought to the home on four-wheelers because the driveways are just washed out. It's just amazing to see all the water and how a lot of these homes literally are on pieces of land. They just look like islands in the middle of this massive lake in southern Manitoba.
Vehicles can be seen stranded on washed-out roads, and instead of a car in the driveway, there's a boat. It's hard to tell if they're driving on the river or over farmland. Down here, it's all the same.
You can't tell where the road ends or where it starts.
While most homes are diked or raised, the rest of their farmyards are completely submerged. Buildings are destroyed, and vehicles are underwater.
The further south we go to Morris, the less dry land there is. It's difficult to tell where the Red River banks really are because it's built everywhere over farmland, up to homes, and in some areas you can see stranded cattle just hanging on to the last of the dry land that there is.
After several hours in the air, we've seen enough and head back to dry land. But provincial officials warn the flood of 2009 is far from over. Lorraine Nickel, Global News.
You're watching the Evening News live on Global Winnipeg.